3CL Foundation and the Commonwealth of Learning are partners in Vancouver. We're looking at the potential use of digital identity wallets, both in the EU and in British Columbia, as a means of facilitating the interoperability of micro-credentials. So it's like, I guess we're moving on from the whole concept of verifiable credentials, narrowing this down into micro-credentials.
If identity wallets is something that would want to explore, it can be explored in terms of micro-credentials, because there's a lot of positive energy around micro-credentials, and that's locally in Canada, but also what I've seen with our engagement with ministries and governments across the Commonwealth. So even beyond the EU, there's really quite a lot of interest from governments in this for various reasons, sometimes economic, sometimes in terms of quality assurance. But so I think the space is fairly active, but the issue comes in with something like the wallet, getting that to be accepted and interoperable across.
What constitutes my identity also includes my skills, my experience, my education. So any prior learning, any academic learning, but also demonstrated skill. So to me, it's what we're moving towards. What the current state is trying to transition different generations into a digital wallet that holds their academic credentials.
If you look at education, then the use case that the European Commission thinks of is the diploma use case. That paper that you will get after 4 years or 6 years or whatever, how many years in university, and that you will use 2 times or 3 times in your life. Whereas the real exciting things are happening, in my opinion, around the university alliances, the exchange of qualifications, whatever, the fact that you successfully completed Computer Science 101, and when you apply for a job, then they don't care if you have your complete master's degree. They just want to know if your level in Python programming is at the required level. That kind of transaction, I can see the millions of transactions per day. The showing your diploma, we're talking about hundreds of transactions a day. So whenever I look at these kind of ecosystems, I look at scaling properties, and then the micro credentials. Those are the ones that we really need to be able to scale, in my opinion.
The fact that some governments are interested in, they don't know that they're interested in micro credentials. They just know that they're interested in lifelong learning and sort of increased mobility in the workforce. But the problem is, of course, that actually rarely manifests itself as anything real. And I'm looking for sort of what could be a good driver for the use case, right? Where do we actually find consumers of micro credentials? And I don't think that finding them inside of the education sector is going to be good enough for wide scale adoption. That is just a way for us to show each other what our qualifications are, and we already have that as academics. So I think what we should be thinking of and looking for are actual near production requirements, right? Who wants this stuff? I'm pretty sure they exist. We just don't manage to talk to them that much.
We asked predominantly young graduates, but what do you need it for? And what they were saying is, I don't need like a monolithic solution where I can't break out to, but I have all these different bits and pieces. I might have a Google Mail that I'm using to apply, and I did all these small little projects that that represent experience, but I don't really know how to go about proving to someone that I did all of this. So what we learned was that actually, a combination of experience points, but also micro credentials that represent, academic content or certificates, in a traditional sense, is what needs to be put together. So the combination of both practical experience and these micro credentials on top of an academic degree or instead of is what is really interesting for graduates and for people who enter the workforce and kind of build a career.
Well, I would say micro-credentials in most contexts, including in that province, typically are for access to workplace, upskilling, reskilling, cross-skilling. I would advocate for their usage to also be for a way to systematize quality assured learning for the purposes of creating opportunities for scalable admission and transfer into higher education institutions. That has been less common.
The Spanish Medical Association. They are the council of the Spanish medical associations, in fact. So they have the information about all medical doctors. They typically produce credentials related to the good standing of medical doctors, and these are in some cases sent outside the European Union. For instance, they send this to Australia directly because they have an agreement. They also have a credential which is like that certifies the professional competence of the medical doctor. It is accepted everywhere in the world. It is not only in the European Union, but it would work better if we were able to convert this into interoperable verifiable credentials, for which we need to set up international standards regarding the data model, for instance. This is where the value lies, in my opinion.
Any educational institution should be aware, ideally, on the region, right? But also, what are the trends, right, at European level and national level? But in close contact with the human resources of the companies that are around, right, to identify the business models, how they need to evolve also due to the digital transition, the Green Deal, and this stuff. And that means doing a joint work between the university, let's say, or the educational institutions that are identifying new learning opportunities, new trends, whatever, right, or new requirements from society, because that's what it's about, right? And then do a joint work with the human resources of those companies to go down level and identify what are the skills that are required, what are the current ones, what are the skills for upskilling, for reskilling, and so on. This is something that I think BET is doing better, far from universities.
Common definitions across institutions, across governments, across industries, and so forth are unlikely. But well understood definitions. We don't have to define this the same way, but I can read what yours is. And so as an employer, as a student who's earned this, whatever, it's very clear what I can communicate about what it is that I can do because I have this credential. And I think that's at this time the most likely short-term and medium-term outcome. I don't know how even at a provincial level you could say, well, here's what a microcertificate is, and get all the universities and then the private providers and everybody else to say, yep, that's what we think it is too. Could happen. Maybe there'd be reason to have it happen if it was accompanied by incentives. I mean, I don't know. If you did do something like that, though, it does create the ability to mix and match and stack and share between institutions.
I see today how much issues we're having to achieve, like technical interoperability between different frameworks and different stacks for various reasons, right? It's highly unlikely that we will end up with a single global technology stack. I don't think this will ever happen. So it's easier to work in the opposite direction we express all the information. If you provide enough information, then we can decide whether or not to accept it. And also, like when we talk about verifiable credentials, there's also, I mean, they are mainly designed for like machine processing, right? So for essentially for automation. But fact is, not all processes can be fully automated, right? In many cases, you can perform certain checks, but beyond that, you will need someone to look into more details and evaluate the context and then make a decision. So
at the absolute minimum, it's storage and access of your credentials, and all of it being device bound and ideally some sort of biometric bound as well, and cryptographically signed. So I think those three elements are kind of what we're hearing as this step change in secure online verifiable information that it came from a trusted issuing authority, it came from a specific device, and you ultimately it came from a specific live human that's associated with that credential. So at its absolute core, I think it's that sort of functionality, and then it's probably more, the wide funnel of use cases that this specific application is looking to serve.
I believe that the fact that there's this element of registrars in every member state, which will then notify to the Commission, will support and will facilitate the interoperability between the wallets. Because that will mean that if I am a relying party in Malta, I am recognized as a relying party not solely in Malta, but by the Commission. And the fact that there is an emphasis on standards, on the use of standards, means that the wallets will be able to communicate better.
We're seeing the development in the UK that they are developing their own digital identity scheme. At some point in the quite near future, we have to start asking the question about how do these play together. We've had delegations from Japan and Singapore and these kind of countries visiting Finland, and they are looking at the work that we're doing in the EU and saying that we don't have this kind of a natural forum or framework in which we could collaborate with other countries. We have to do this by ourselves, but we see that we could benefit if we could trust each other. So I think that is the next big question. When we have our stuff sorted out in the EU, we have to think the global scale.
Well, I think this one's a real opportunity, especially now. I think the European Union and Canada will probably be closer than ever in the future. And I think the opportunity for mobility and transfer of knowledge skills is really important. And it's an opportunity that needs some standardization. And if we were to do it first with the European Union, I think a lot of Canadians would be happy with that.
We're right now working to build an agile initiative, and there are very key use cases underneath it. One is working to immediately solve issues around KYC, know your customer, and anti-money laundering. Two is around things like city or provincial permitting, and where credentials can be used in those use cases. Three is on labor mobility. And when we think about labor mobility, that's really, I see all of the academic credentials falling under labor mobility, whether that's your continuing professional credential or whether that's, and a bigger, harder problem, I'm a doctor and I'm trained in British Columbia, and now I have a degree from British Columbia, and now I want to go work in another province.
We need the education ecosystem to present itself to us and say, hey, we've got this real need, and we've got, the mandate and capacity to work with you as the office of the CIO providing centralized digital trust service. And we're going to work with our stakeholders, to make it happen. we can't make it happen. On the positive front, like what we have is real and working. And
Yeah.
we have a government issued identity credential.
Yeah.
I mean, that's
Yeah.
special.